In the last couple of videos, we've figured out how to find an individual item in our list. This allowed us to pull back a specific item based off of the title in our Notes app, and it allowed us to find a specific item and delete it in the To-Dos application. Now, in these cases, we're targeting one item in our array. But what if we wanted to do something a bit different? For example, what if I didn't know the exact title for my note, something that's probably the case, but I know that I put trip in it, or I know that I put office somewhere in the text? Currently, we don't have a solution for that. We're going to focus on adding that in this video, and the same thing is going to happen in the To-Do application. What if we want to get a list of just the to-dos that haven't been completed so we know what we actually need to work on? Now, this concept is called filtering. We take an existing array and we create a new array with some of the items based off of whatever the filter is. So if I were to filter by items that haven't been completed, I would get a new array of objects back with just this item and this item. If I was creating an email application, I could filter by a specific author. I would go from a list of all my emails to a list of emails just by that person. Now that we have a general idea of what we're working towards, let's go ahead and actually implement this. And we're going to start over in notes.js. What we're going to do is create a companion to find note. Instead of finding a specific note by the exact title, we're going to create one that's way more flexible. It's going to allow us to provide a search term, and if that text exists anywhere inside of the note's title or body, it'll be considered a match. So let's take a look at an example. If I was using this application and in the search box I typed something like trip, I would get a list of notes back. It would contain just one, the only one that has trip mentioned somewhere in the title or the body. Now, if I were to search something else like NE, it would search all my notes and it would match any note where I have NE back to back. I have that in the first note with the partial word right here, part of the word next in the title, and I have it down below in the last note. It's part of the body. So both of these would be considered matches, and I would get both of them back to do something with them. So providing this flexible searching and getting multiple items back is going to be super important for really working with arrays in a meaningful way. Right here, we are going to first explore this technique outside of a function, and then we will wrap it in a function so it can be used and reused. Let's go ahead and kick things off by messing around with it. The method we're going to be using is called filter, and you can find it over in the array documentation. If we scroll down to F, we got filter sitting right here just above find, and like many of the methods we've been using with arrays, it takes a function as its one and only argument. Now down below, you're seeing something that looks like nothing we've ever worked with before. Don't worry, we will address exactly what this is, and by the end of the course, this syntax will make sense. For now though, let's just go ahead and switch back into the terminal and Visual Studio Code and actually implement this. So it is notes, our array, dot filter. Filter gets called like our other array methods with a single argument, which is a function. And like our other array methods, we get this callback called with two things: the individual item, which I'll refer to as a note, and the index, which I'll just call index. Now in here, what we do is we return a Boolean, which is going to be pretty similar to what we saw with find index and find. If we return the Boolean true, then that means this item should be kept in the new array we're generating. If we return the Boolean false, that means this item should not be part of the new array we're generating. So if I were to search NE, for example, I would want to return true for this item since it would be considered a match. I'd return false for this item since it doesn't contain the characters NE back to back, and down below I would return true for this one as well. Now, filter gives you back this new array. It does not make any changes to notes. So I could create a variable to store the return result. Const filtered notes, for example, and I'll set this equal to whatever comes back from filter. And then before we actually do anything, all I'm going to do is console.log filtered notes. Now, to keep things simple at first, what we can do inside of filter is just return true. This is going to generate a new array filtered notes, and what is it going to do? It's going to have all of the same items as notes because we consider every single one a match. Whoops, I accidentally dragged that text. I don't even know why that's a feature anymore in these editors. Let's go ahead and run the program to see what happens. That is node notes.js. What do we get? We get our array right here, and we have every single item, all 3 notes. If I were to return false, we would have no notes be considered a match, which means that filtered notes wouldn't be undefined. It would actually just be an empty array since there are no matches. Right here, if I run it, that is exactly what we get. So filter is always going to return an array. It's just whether or not there are any items in that array. Now that we've seen how this works, let's go ahead and actually swap out the static Boolean with some code that actually makes the calculation to see if a note should be considered a match. The logic in here is going to be similar to things we've done so far. There's just going to be a bit more of it because we're comparing the title and the body. So what I'm going to do is actually not put all of this on one line. It would be a super long line spreading way past the edge of the screen. Instead, I am going to break this up into a couple of different lines, and that's great because we'll look at alternative ways to structure our code, all of which are perfectly fine. It's okay that there's multiple ways to do something. In most cases, both of those ways are perfectly valid. What we're going to do right here is start by figuring out if the title is a match. We're going to ignore the body altogether. So const, I'm going to call this one is title match. And here we're going to work on generating a Boolean, true if the title is a match and false otherwise. Once again, we do not care about the body at all. That'll come on the next line. Right here, what's the goal? The goal is to look at the note title. So that would be note.title. We're going to make this search case insensitive. So we'll take this string and convert it to lowercase by calling the method. Now what comes back from this? It's a string. I want to talk about something which is called method chaining. From here, we know that is title match is a string. So let's go ahead and switch that up and just call it something like title. Down below, if I wanted to wrap up this feature, I could use title.includes to figure out if the title includes some other string. And this is perfectly fine, but we can actually just chain includes right onto the end over here. So let me use the undo command to back up, changing the variable name back to isTitleMatch. And what I'm going to do is add .includes. Remember, what comes back from note is an object. What comes back from note.title is a string, which means we can call the string method. What comes back from the string method is another string, which means we can call another string method, the includes method, which we already explored. Now what I'm going to do is pass into includes the search text. In this case, the search text will come from a function argument, but for the moment, we can just type in some characters. I'll stick with NE, for example. Now, we are going to take these and convert them to lowercase, but we'll focus on that when we actually create the functionized version. So we have isTitleMatch all set up, and now we can move on to isBodyMatch, which will be very similar. A new const isBodyMatch equals note.body.to lower case. We get a string back. We're going to use includes, and we're going to check if that string includes the search string, which is just the static NE. Now down below, we're going to use some of our logical operators to return the correct thing. We want to return true if isTitleMatch is true, or using the logical OR operator, isBodyMatch is true. So as long as one of those is true, I want to return true from this callback function. And that should be match with an uppercase M. So this is going to make sure that we are searching everything, and the result is going to be that filtered notes will contain a subset of all of our notes. Let's go ahead and test our work by saving the notes file and rerunning things from the terminal. When I do, what do I get? I just get notes that have NE. In this case, we're seeing the first one and the last one. If I were to switch up this string to something else, like office here and office down below, I would expect just that last one to be a match. Right here, that is exactly what we get. We get an array back, and we get back just a single object in that array. So these would be the search results we would show to the screen, something we will do later. For now, we're just dumping them to the terminal. Now that we have this in place, let's wrap it in a function, and then we'll be all done moving on to the challenge. I'm going to call this one const find notes plural. Whoops, that's find, not fine. So this is going to return multiple notes, hence the pluralized version. It will be a function, and it will still take in 2 arguments. The first argument we're going to take in is still the notes to search, and the second argument we're going to take in is your search text. I can just call this one query, for example, although you could call it anything you like. Now what we're going to do is take all of this code we just wrote, minus the console.log, cut it out, and just paste it right inside of the function. All we need to do to make sure this actually works is use query. So instead of putting the static string here, we're going to use whatever search text the user provided when they called the function. Right here in includes, we pass in query, and we'll convert it to lowercase to make the search case insensitive. And down below, we're going to do the exact same thing. Query dot to lowercase, calling it as a method. So in the end of the day, what does this highlighted code do? It resolves to a string. So in the end of the day, we're passing a string to includes, which is perfectly fine. Now all we have to do is actually return something from find notes. Down below, I could return filtered notes, and that would get the job done. But once again, there is no need to define a variable and then just return it. We could remove the variable declaration and just return whatever value we were originally assigning to it. So I'll remove const, the name, and the equal sign, and just put return right there, making this return redundant. Excellent. Now that we have a find notes function in place, let's go ahead and actually test it out and make sure it still works. Right here, in console.log's argument list, I'm going to call find notes. That makes sure I print the return value. I'm going to call it as a function because it is one. I'm going to pass in the notes to search and my search term. For this one, let's go ahead and target that middle note. I will use the word work for that. I'm going to save the file. Over in the terminal, we can rerun the script, and what do we get? We just get a single note back. We get habits to work on. If I were to target the note by the body instead of something in the title, I can use eating, for example. I would expect to still match that second note. If I rerun the script, that's exactly what we get. In both situations, we're getting the habits note back. Now we can search as often as we want and with whatever value we need. Now that we've explored filter, it's time for you to use it on your own over inside of the to-do application. What you're going to be doing is creating a function that shows just the to-dos that have yet to be completed. Down below, I will give you a sample function call, although it's going to be your job to actually create the function. I'll comment out our call to delete to-do, and what we're going to do is call console.log so we can dump the output to the screen. We're going to call this new function, which doesn't yet exist, but we could call it something like get things to do. We'll call it as a function, and this one just takes a single argument. It takes the list of to-dos to search. Now, later on, we might have a more complex to-do application where we have 6 different lists, one for work, one for home, one for a hobby, and we might want to call get things to do for each list. So that is why we take the list in as a function argument. In this case, we just have one list, but we want to make sure that our functions allow us to be flexible in the future. So we're taking the list in as that argument. Now it's your job to actually create the function that uses filter to get a list of just the to-dos that have a completed value of false. So that would match clean kitchen and do work in my case. I shouldn't see the ones that have already been finished. For me, that would be order cat food, buy food, and exercise. Those should not be showing up, just clean kitchen and do work. Take as much time as you need to knock this one out, define the function, set up your filter call, and return that new array. Take a moment to pause the video, test your work, mess around with some of the values, and make sure the output changes if you change their completed values. And when you're done, come back and click play. All right, how'd that one go? Let's go ahead and kick things off by defining the function I'm using already. Const get things to do. This is going to be a function, so I'll set it up as such, and we are going to take an argument, so I can add that into the mix. I'll call this to-dos. Now inside of the function, the goal is to return something. We're trying to return a new array. Now I already kind of know where this function is going to go, so I'm just going to start it off with a return keyword. And then I'm going to use todos.filter. So what am I returning from this function? I'm returning the subset of all the to-dos, that new array. I pass my function into filter, and I set up those function arguments. I get access to the individual to-do, and I get access to the index. Now, once again, you don't have to name the index if you're not using it, so I could leave this off. I'm just adding it to remind you that it does indeed exist. Inside of filter, our goal is to now return true for the ones we actually want to keep. Those are the ones where the completed value is false. So how do we get this done? Well, I can return. I will look at todo.completed, and I will check if it equals false. If todo.completed equals false, the result of this comparison operator will be true, meaning that true is going to end up returning. Let's go ahead and save the file and run things to see if it actually works. Over in the terminal, I'm going to clear the terminal output, and then I'm going to go ahead and run that script, node todo.js. When I run it, what do I get? I just get clean kitchen and do work. Now we could structure this a different way as well. What if we removed the highlighted code here and just referenced the Boolean? Currently, it's the opposite of what we want. We're going to end up returning false for the to-dos where we actually want to return true. So we can just flip the Boolean value using the logical not operator, which we explored a few sections ago. This is going to make sure that for to-dos that have a completed value of false, we return true, meaning they stay in the list. And for to-dos with a completed value of true, we return false, making sure they're filtered out. Both ways of solving the problem are perfectly fine, and if we run the code, we're going to see they both actually get the job done. Now let's go ahead and just tweak things a little bit to make sure our changes are reflected. I'm going to say that I have not ordered cat food and that I did clean the kitchen, which is indeed true. I can save the file, rerun things. We can see clean kitchen is gone and order cat food is now inside of my things to do. Using the filter method, we're going to be able to take an array and get a subset of that array back, and this is super powerful for searching. There are just a few more things that we're going to talk about related to arrays before we continue on to the next section and figure out how all of this fits into the browser. In the very next one, we're going to look at how we can sort our arrays, putting, for example, completed items last or sorting our notes in alphabetical order. I'm excited to get to that, so let's go ahead and jump right in.